5 Children and It by Edith Nesbit. Read by Samantha Bond. The house was 3 miles from the station, but before the dusty hired fly had rattled along for 5 minutes, the children began to put their heads out of the carriage window and to say, "Aren't we nearly there?" And every time they passed a house, they all said, "Oh, is this it?" But it never was, till they reached the very top of the hill. And then there was a white house, with a green garden and an orchard beyond, and Mother said, "Here we are." "How white the house is," said Robert. "And look at the roses," said Anthea. "And the plums," said Jane. "It is rather decent," Cyril admitted. The baby said, "Want to go walkie?" And the fly stopped, with a last rattle and jolt. It was not really a pretty house at all. Father used to say that the ironwork on the roof was like an architect's nightmare. But the house was deep in the country, with no other house in sight, and the children had been in London for 2 years, and so the white house seemed to them a sort of fairy palace set down in an earthly paradise. The children had explored the gardens and the outhouses thoroughly before they were caught and cleaned for tea, and they saw quite well that they were certain to be happy at the White House. The best part of it all was that there were no rules about not going to places and not doing things. The house was on the edge of a hill with a wood behind it, and a chalk quarry on one side and a gravel pit on the other. Now, children will believe almost anything, and grown-ups know this. That is why they tell you that the earth is round like an orange, when you can see perfectly well that it is flat and lumpy. And why they say the earth goes round the sun, when you can see for yourself any day that the sun gets up in the morning and goes to bed at night like a good sun as it is, and the earth knows its place and lies as still as a mouse. Yet I dare say you believe all that about the earth and the sun. And if so, you will find it quite easy to believe that before Anthea and Cyril and the others had been a week in the country, they had found a fairy. At least, they called it that, because that was what it called itself, and of course it knew best. But it was not like any fairy you ever saw or heard of or read about. It was at the gravel pits. Father had had to go away suddenly on business, and Mother had gone away to stay with Granny, who was not very well. They both went in a great hurry, and when they had gone the house seemed dreadfully quiet and empty, and the children wished they had something to do. It was Cyril who said, "I say, let's take our Margate spades and go and dig in the gravel pits. We can pretend it's the seaside." Each of the children carried its own spade, and took it in turns to carry the lamb. He was the baby, and they called him that because "bar" was the first thing he ever said. They called Anthea Panther, which seems silly when you read it, but when you say it sounds a little like her name. The gravel pit was very large and wide, with grass growing round the edges at the top, and dry, stringy wild flowers, purple and yellow. It was like a giant's wash-hand basin. The children built a castle. Then Cyril wanted to dig out a cave to place smugglers in, but the others thought it might bury them alive. So it ended in all spades going to work to dig a hole through the castle to Australia. They dug and they dug and they dug, and their hands got sandy and hot and red. The lamb had tried to eat the sand, and had cried so hard when he found that it was not, as he had supposed, brown sugar, that he was now tired out, and was lying asleep in a warm, fat bunch in the middle of the half-finished castle. "Suppose the bottom of the hole gave way suddenly," Jane said, "and you tumbled out among the little Australians. All the sand would get in their eyes." Cyril and Anthea knew that Australia was not quite so near us all that, but they agreed to stop using the spades and to go on with their hands. They were just making up their...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?